You never had any type of orientation on your way out, nothing. You came back and you was on your own.
I had quite a few traumatic events happen to me, including being sexually assaulted while I was over there.
If you watched any of the news about the war, it was all very technical. And that wasn't the war I experienced. The war I experienced was up close and personal, and it was dirty.
You know, once I start taking sick, it's like everybody thought it was a joke. You know, they thought I was malingering. No one was listening to me.
I do not understand why someone like my son, Steve Campbell, walked into a VA hospital with extreme pain in his stomach and was told he was probably an alcoholic and didn't know it.
I was recruited by a recruiter right out of high school. He came into the high school and plucked me right out.
I served in the military because that's what you do. I'm an American citizen. I believe in my country and believe in defending it.
I had no misgivings about joining the Army or volunteering for the draft.
I was proud of serving my country, and I also wanted to know what was going on, so I had volunteered to go to Vietnam.
I joined the military to serve my country. My brother was a Marine, so I wanted to kind of follow his footsteps.
I also did have a sense of public service, and there was a military tradition in my family.
My grandfather was a combat wounded veteran with the 1st Infantry Division in the First World War. My father served in the Pacific Theater in World War II. My brother's a Vietnam veteran, and I was a Cold Warrior. So everybody on my grandfather's side in the last 100 years, basically, has been a citizen soldier. And I know what it means to have someone that you love be in harm's way and the consequences that can flow from that. And most of all, I know how our government can turn around and forget about those people. This is a pattern that our government has used for most of the last 100 years. And it began with a lot of veterans who got gassed in the First World War who were not properly compensated and taken care of. It happened again during World War II when secret chemical warfare experiments were conducted on at least 60,000 American military personnel, and those remained classified literally for decades. And those folks never got any help. And then, of course, we had the atomic testing that took place in the 40s and 50s with a number of folks being exposed there. We had additional chemical and biological testing on military personnel at Dugway Proving Ground and a whole host of other places in the United States and elsewhere throughout the 1960s. And then, of course, we had this entire imbroglio of Agent Orange in Vietnam, and then Gulf War illness, and then subsequently the anthrax vaccine controversy. Then government essentially denies knowledge and responsibility.
My name is Carol Brandow Sundling. I was a United States Air Force flight nurse. I went in the Air Force in 1969, and I was assigned to Vietnam. I was not prepared, of course, for what I saw, and after picking up a couple hundred guys a day with severe burns, white phosphorus burns, double amputees, people with half their faces blown off, I knew that I had to change from my nurse's heart to my head and just put all of my own feelings and my own needs aside so that I could do the work that I had to do. I knew that intellectually, and at the same time, I froze emotionally and never got unfrozen. When I was in Vietnam, I went to a party one evening and I was sexually assaulted. I did not report it to anyone. I was young, I was blonde, I was a second lieutenant and he was a senior officer. In the 60s and 70s, you didn't tell anyone when things like that happened to you. My PTSD was actually, for me, it was survival. It wasn't PTSD. I got married and had 2 children in 2 years. I became single a year after that. I was in the reserves and had a full-time job. I also went back to school. I just figured God blessed me with an inordinate amount of energy, and I may as well take advantage of it. I did have a problem with alcohol. I got into recovery in 1986 and did well for about 5 years. And then I was at the scene of an accident that my niece was killed in, and it was out in the country in a big field. 5 kids laying around the field, one body covered up with a sheet, and all of a sudden, choppers started coming in from Geisinger Hospital, and I stood there in that field, and I felt like I was right back in Vietnam, looking up, waiting for what's next.
My name is Alfredo Boyce, and I was with the 82nd Airborne Division. I went to Vietnam in 68, 69. I got out of the service in 1971. When I came back, there was a lot of protests going on. I tried to forget my whole military career when I got back, because I was trying to pick up my life and carry on with it. But there were so many problems that I was having that I didn't really understand that was related to my military career. When I came back from the service, you know, I couldn't be around noises and stuff, and my family, they couldn't understand. You know, if something dropped, a balloon popped or something like that, then I had some type of nightmares at the time. So I had to move away from my family, even though I was broke. A lot of veterans become homeless when they come back home because they're depressed, and then they start drinking or using drugs, and that's when they hit rock bottom and become homeless. And it's from there is where I pick them up and try to reintegrate them back into society. Currently, the organization that I'm with is Black Veterans for Social Justice, which was formed in 1979. It was formed by a few guys who saw a lot of soldiers that were sleeping in the doorways and on the street, and they felt that they had to do something about it. They started helping out the guys, show them how to file the claims for benefits.
For people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, it's not like being an amputee. These are people who walk around apparently looking healthy, apparently leading successful lives, and eventually all this stuff has to be dealt with.
My brother served the country, and yet he became homeless. Before I went to the Gulf War, my brother tried to talk me out of it, but he told me to serve my country because that's what I volunteered to do. But yet, he just told me to be careful. I received the anthrax vaccine during the Persian Gulf War. I came back, I began to feel some strange pains and things going on in my body. Take a lot of medication just to sleep during the night because of the pain. How am I going to support my family without the proper compensation that I need for my service? I don't want to become homeless, but I've known many veterans that are homeless. I don't think that our country really cares about the veteran.
When I first enlisted, I had an inkling about some of these kinds of things, and I remember in 82 or 83, it wasn't long after the wall was dedicated, that I remembered asking one of my platoon sergeants, I said, hey, what's the big deal here? Why are these guys only getting any kind of recognition now? He said, Pat, our government basically treats its soldiers like rubbers. They use them as long as they want, and when they're done, they strip them off and they forget about them.
When you join the military, part of the deal is you might get hurt. You might get shot. You might get run over by a truck or a tank. You might get exposed to chemical weapons. A host of things may happen to you. But the contract with our society is that those people who put their lives on the line on behalf of their country will be taken care of if they're hurt while serving. My name's Charles Sheehan Miles. I was in the Gulf in 1991 with the 24th Infantry Division. I was a tank crewman. There were no reporters up there on the front line during the war. It was brief, but in the several days of direct combat, we killed an awful lot of people. I vividly recall seeing civilians who were caught in the crossfire. The battlefield was in the middle of a fairly urban, modern country. It was a mess. It was very chaotic. Back in 1991, the Pentagon said that there were no chemical weapons. Those of us who were there, who saw the weapons, it just didn't make any sense. As time went on, the Pentagon initially said, well, we think there was this one incident, and maybe there were 100 or so who were exposed. And today, they estimate that 99,000 Gulf War veterans were exposed to sarin and mustard gas. If you match that against the VA's records, you'll find that those 99,000 are 45% more likely to be suffering illnesses and to be getting paid disability.
I first heard about depleted uranium in the fall of 1990 when I was in a Navy school for a gun called the Phalanx Close-in Weapon System, and that gun shoots depleted uranium ammunition. The Department of Defense got involved during the 60s and 70s in testing depleted uranium for use in armor-piercing ammunition. By the time of the 1991 Gulf War, it was deployed for the first time to be used in combat. Before the war, the Department of Defense had anticipated that if we used this weapon in combat, there could be exposures on the battlefield among soldiers and civilians that could lead to a range of health effects, including cancer. In their own guidance, they had said if soldiers have potential exposures, they should be tested. And also, if they're working on contaminated equipment, at a minimum, they should wear respiratory protection, and ideally, they should wear full protective suits. They had never told soldiers, even at a bare minimum, to stay away from destroyed vehicles, which would have taken away a lot of potential exposures.
I'm Navy Captain Julia Dyckman, and I'm Nurse Corps. And I served a total of 30 years with the Navy. I was in Vietnam from December of 1969 to December of 1970 on the USS Sanctuary, and then I was activated in January of 91 to the Persian Gulf with Fleet Hospital 15. And when I was in the Gulf, I was a commander and I was considered a division officer. And I was in charge of the casualty area, which was called casualty receiving, and I was in charge of the clinics. I myself started to get sick over there. I had severe reaction to the secret shots. Now, we don't know exactly what they were because they're only recorded as secret shot A and secret shot B. When we were administering to people, the bottles were covered and we had vial numbers. And these vial numbers were put into books that we were supposed to record in people's records when they came back. And when we came back, those books disappeared. And nobody had their shots recorded into their records. They kept saying it didn't happen. There wasn't a chemical, there wasn't a biological. So now you come back and you have an illness and you're blaming it from the injection that you received over in the Gulf, but you have no record of ever receiving that injection. I was sick while I was over there, and I had fevers and a lot of neurological problems. When I came back, I started to realize that there were quite a few people who were ill, and I wasn't alone. I had access to VA because of my varicose vein problem that I had in Vietnam. Most of the other people didn't even get in the door of VA because you have to have a condition that was related to your service, especially as a reservist. Most vets are not looking for compensation, but you're looking for a better health. You want to be able to function, and you can't because you're physically damaged. The biggest concern is the lying, the cover-ups will still continue. Now I have 2 sons in the military, the 3rd one next year, and things have not changed. If it continues, what's facing my own children, and are they going to end up with the same type of problems that I have?
My son, Stephen Campbell, was very proud to be a Marine. He was sent to Desert Storm for 8 months. He was on the front line. He was the lead howitzer with the artillery division. They took the city of Kuwait. He was in the midst of all the fighting the entire time he was over there. Steve came home from the Marines in '91, healthy, very, very tan. Was going to college, started his own business. In May of 1998, Steve was on a health regime and thought he had pulled a muscle in his stomach.
Upper left side, upper left quadrant.
At some point in time, did that get worse?
One night in July it did.
Explain, please.
I was asleep in bed and just woke up with a real severe, felt like somebody had a knife stuck in me, in my stomach. It lasted for long enough for me to get to the emergency room at the VA. And I was admitted at that time, and the following 4 or 5 days they ran different tests on me.
He was released from the VA hospital at that time, but returned many times to the emergency room with the same pain. For a year, Stephen would go into the VA hospital and the doctor would tell him over and over, "You're probably an alcoholic and you don't know it. You probably drank too much when you were in the Marines. Your pain is all in your head. There's nothing wrong with you." In the meantime, Stephen is losing weight rapidly. He cannot eat at all. The pain is excruciating.
Did you follow all of the recommendations he made about diet and medication and so forth?
Yes. That's the aggravating part. I was doing all they were telling me to do and nothing seemed to work. The pain was spreading to the right side also.
Did Dr. Yusuf ever say anything to you that indicated that he didn't accept your statement that you were following his recommendations?
Objection.
I assumed he didn't believe me because of his insistence that I followed the diet and the medication. I assumed he didn't believe I was doing that.
I finally got him to go to a doctor friend of mine. They diagnosed him within 2 or 3 days with cancer and gave him 8 weeks to live. This is a cancer that was growing over all the organs in his abdomen.
They go in and take as much of the cancer out as they can find, and any traces of it around organs, possibly some of the organ. And then after that you start a chemotherapy where the chemo goes right into your abdomen.
They removed the lining of his stomach. They removed his spleen. They removed his appendix. They removed part of his small intestines. After the surgery, they were supposed to put a port in his stomach so they could just put the chemo directly into his stomach. And I remember at the hospital that he overheard the doctors and nurses talking in the hall that they didn't put the port in. And he almost began to cry because he felt at that point that he knew he wasn't going to live.
I don't do much. I lay around a lot, try to rest. You don't feel like doing a whole lot when you're hurting. And the doctor explained to me that cancer is like a flu, that it drains your energy, and it's why you don't eat and why you lose weight.
This is not an easy question, I know, but can you describe for us at all how this diagnosis and the problem you're having right now, how that's changed your outlook on things?
Well, it stops you from thinking about the future completely. All you think about now is being sick, and anytime you think about what you may do in the future, the first thing that comes into mind after that is, well, you may not be here in the future.
And Stevie said, "Mom," he said, "days. I only have days. So what am I going to do about the boys," meaning his nephews. He adored his nephews and wanted to be there to watch them grow up. His birthday was on February the 6th. We had him at home. His buddies came up to see him, and we had a birthday cake. He ate a little tiny piece of his birthday cake because he couldn't eat anything, hardly. So the ambulance came to the house, wheeled the gurney in the house. His little nephews sat in a chair together and watched their uncle be wheeled out of the house for the last time. Stephen died on February the 12th, year 2000. Steve didn't even have a chance to fight cancer. If his cancer had been diagnosed a year earlier, he was 75 pounds heavier and healthier, at least he would have had a chance to fight.
We have to always monitor people coming back from wars who've been exposed to chemical warfare, things like that, so we as a nation have to give them a hand. Those who had malaria after the Spanish-American War, the veterans who were exposed to mustard gas, who died years before their time, Vietnam with the Agent Orange, the Persian Gulf veterans who are exposed to chemicals. The nation's leadership needs to take a much more generous way to address these problems as they happen. The government does have a tendency towards official denial, perhaps because money is involved.
Hello everybody, my name is Jan Scruggs. I will be your tour guide today for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. By way of background, I was in the military in Vietnam and decided in 1979 that a National Vietnam Veterans Memorial ought to be built here in Washington, D.C., and began the effort to build this memorial, to get legislation through Congress. It was begun in 1979. Maya Ying Lin, the designer, felt that the names on the memorial should be placed on the memorial chronologically rather than alphabetically, allowing the military veterans who were in a particular battle to actually see the names of their buddies resting right next to each other.
When I came back from Vietnam, I expected that I would be able to forget all about it, and I discovered soon enough that it was going to be the major study of my life, and it's something that you live with every day. So I tried to make sense of the experience through primarily reading and reflection, and then I began to talk to others who had been through similar experiences. What I do now is train veterans for the Veterans Education Project in Massachusetts to go into schools and talk to young people about their experiences in Vietnam and elsewhere in the military. Many teachers invite us back to the classroom because they think that we allow young people a context within which they can make decisions and come to conclusions about the September 11th attacks. And on a personal level, the kinds of stories that vets tell help young people confront issues in their own lives like violence, grief, peer pressure, and bullying and racism.
The Vietnam Veterans of America set up their founding principle that never again shall one generation of veterans abandon another. They have stood by that through helping Gulf War veterans along in terms of forming their own organization. The Gulf War Resource Center came out of a coalition of small grassroots groups that had formed up around the country. The main goals have always been appropriate research for veterans, making sure that the VA took care of the people who are sick. Another key goal has been to ensure that these types of abuses don't happen to veterans again.
Most of the people have no idea what they're exposed to. I know even...
After our conference in 1998, Gulf War veterans lobbied Congress for a couple of days, which was actually very effective in getting a response from that.
The most effective program that they have in this country for veterans is the Vet Center. It's completely separate from the VA. It has completely separate records. They do counseling, therapy. Well, they just do everything, and they really saved my life. I don't think the general population has any idea how the veterans are being treated. Men who served 35 years in their country are disabled because of their military duty and can't collect their retirement and their disability.
These young men and women now unlike our grandfathers and great-grandfathers, are aware of the dangers of just being in the military. They're aware that they might be handling depleted uranium and they might be exposed to chemicals. They're willing to give their life up for that. But if they don't die over there, then we want to at least be able to take care of them when they come home.
There is help out there. The government isn't necessarily going to tell the truth about what's happening over there. It's everyone's duty to make them tell the truth.
What made this possible from the very beginning is the same thing that made the Agent Orange imbroglio possible, and the atomic vet stuff possible, and the chemical experiments on World War II folks possible. All that stuff really all flows from the same thing, and that is a fundamental lack of care and concern for the people who wear the uniform, a lack of fundamental respect. And if you don't change that, if you don't eliminate the second-class citizen status that these veterans and their families have right now, I don't think there's any way to completely prevent it. Because when they don't have the same rights that civilians do, and they don't have the ability to sue the federal government, and they don't have the ability to go directly after individuals who are responsible for doing these things to them, there's no accountability. And without accountability, there can be no justice.